Planning Commission public hearing. The city appreciates your interest and participation in the public hearing process. The Planning Commission serves as an advisory board to the City Council on land use and zoning matters. The hearing agenda items consist of development applications that require public hearings. The Planning Commission considers the item and makes a recommendation for approval or denial to the City Council. The City Council will make the final decision for or against approval of the application. The agenda consists of the roll call, an administrative report by staff, public comment for non-agendized items, approval of minutes from the previous hearing, continuances for items that will not be heard tonight, withdrawals for items that have been withdrawn from any further consideration, consent agenda for items not likely to require a presentation or discussion. All items on the consent agenda may be voted on together. Any commissioner may move any item from the consent agenda to the regular agenda. Regular agenda is where each item includes a presentation and recommendation by staff, a presentation by the applicant, and public comments. The applicant will then have an opportunity to respond to the public comments. The Planning Commission will deliberate on the case and cast their votes. Non-action items are for discussion-only items. No vote will be cast by the Planning Commission. Citizens wishing to speak on any agenda item will need to fill out a blue speaker card, or if not willing to speak, may fill out a yellow comment card and turn it in at the staff table before the agenda item is to be discussed. The chair will call your name when it is your turn to speak. When called, please come to the podium, state your name and address, and then begin speaking. Groups wishing to speak should elect a spokesperson to represent the views of the group. To facilitate the meeting, your comment will be limited to 3 minutes for individual speakers, 1 additional minute for each additional individual who is present at the hearing and has contributed their time to a representative speaker, up to a maximum of 10 minutes. Please format your speech to fit within the allotted time. A light system is installed on the podium for timing presentations. The light will be green for 2 minutes, yellow for 1, and red when your time is up. Please conclude your comments when the red light appears. Thank you for your interest and time. We'll now begin the hearing with a roll call.
Chair Scarborough?
Here.
Vice Chair Young?
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Present.
Commissioner Ertel?
Here.
Commissioner Joyner?
Here.
Commissioner Drake?
Here.
Commissioner Reed?
Here.
All are here.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment, Mr. Curtis?
Nothing for the non-agendized items.
Great, thank you. Then we'll move to the administrative report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Just wanted to welcome Commissioner Reed and Commissioner Drake to the Planning Commission. They were recently appointed, and we're glad to have you, so welcome aboard. Wanted to draw attention to additional correspondence that we received earlier this week. It should be in front of you, but it wasn't included in the original agenda packet from last week. So I'll just point that out to you. And then lastly, we do plan on meeting in 2 weeks, July 23rd. So we do have agenda items scheduled for 2 weeks, July 23rd. So just want to bring that to your attention. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. We'll go ahead and review the minutes. If there are no comments or questions regarding the minutes from June 11th, I would entertain a motion for approval.
Chair Scarborough, I'll make a motion for approval of the June 11th, 2025 regular meeting minutes as written.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and second. Roll call, please.
Chair Scarborough?
Yes.
Vice Chair Young?
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yes.
Commissioner Ertel?
Yes.
Commissioner Joyner?
Yes.
Commissioner Drake?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Perfect, thank you. All right, we have nothing on the consent agenda, so we'll move to regular agenda item number 2, 6 TA 2024 C-O internalized community storage text amendment.
Yes, good evening, Chair Scarborough, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Taylor Reynolds. I'm a principal planner with Long Range Planning. So I'm going to take you through the first half of this slide deck as there's more citywide and policy implications at the general plan level that I'd like to walk you through. Then I'll hand it over to Meredith Tessier, Senior Planner with Current Planning. So with that, this evening, the action requested by the applicant is a recommendation to City Council regarding a zoning ordinance land use table amendment to allow for internalized community storage facilities, vehicular storage, and warehousing as permitted uses in the commercial office or CO zoning district. That proposed amendment would apply citywide. However, there is a catalyst site that's located at 10,001 North 92nd Street. In review of zoning code amendments that come before City Council and ultimately Planning Commission, the review side from the city standpoint, and even when an applicant brings such through, is to, 1, implement and comply with the general plan, 2, address citywide land use concerns and or encourage specific land uses that may be lacking within the city, to encourage the introduction of new land uses that are compatible with surrounding development and reduce unintended consequences. And finally, they should not be tailored to accommodate a singular site or development proposal. So they should be more broad and citywide reaching because there's different areas of the city that could implement that zoning district. In terms of the commercial office district purpose, it is intended to provide for the development of office and those related uses, and further to promote compatibility with residential use, which is typically adjacent to these commercial office areas when we look at them citywide. They support professional, medical, and administrative office uses and generate daytime activity. On the right-hand side of the screen, it might be hard to see, but on the map, all those blue sites are commercial office districts throughout the city, and they make up generally 683 parcels citywide. The last time Planning Commission saw this request, the applicant had a text amendment proposal that was more limited in its application. It had specificity to lot size, as well as to determine if it was applicable, it had to have certain existing site improvements. And it wasn't very broad, it was very specific. It might have been implemented on a handful of sites citywide. So there was direction for Planning Commission for the applicant to come back with more of a broad implementation of this text amendment. It also lacked standards to protect adjacent residential uses. So with working with the applicant, they revised their text amendment to have, again, more broader application citywide with a focus on the adaptive reuse of existing buildings on these sites. It also introduced additional standards for residential adjacency, such as screening. But with that said, there are 2 legislative versions in your packet this evening. One is the applicant's draft and one is staff's draft, and I'll get into why there is a difference there. The applicant's draft, as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, includes all those things we talked about early on in the slide deck, adding internalized community storage, vehicular storage, and warehousing as permitted uses within the CO district. It also includes that criteria to ensure residential compatibility. Staff's recommended draft includes all of those same things. However, it excludes the warehousing use as a permitted use within the CO district. Again, I will get to why that is in the next slides. This has citywide implications. Typically, warehousing as a use is not typically adjacent to residential areas of the city. Why is that? Commercial office use, or CO, these areas are areas of the city that are typically low impact and daytime use only. They serve as a transitional buffer to residential neighborhoods and are designed for compatibility for those nearby homes. When we looked at those locations citywide, typically adjacent to residential areas of our community, so that buffering is important. They typically produce minimal noise, traffic, and visual disruption. However, when we look at a warehouse as a permitted use, it's permitted within 4 zoning categories currently. The C3 district, C4 district, those are more of our intense commercial uses, and then I1 and IG, which is more of our light industrial or manufacturing areas of the city. So these are areas of the city that produce more intense day and night activity. They're not typically located adjacent to residential areas. They're designed for compatibility with other employment opportunities, and they can produce off-site noise. They may have delivery traffic and have a more utilitarian design. Switching between the zoning side of things and the land use or general plan side of things, warehousing, again, which permits wholesale warehouse and distribution, are located within those 4 zoning categories I mentioned on the previous slide. And warehousing in particular is currently allowed on approximately 2,600 parcels citywide, and you can see those in the green on the right-hand side of the screen. Because warehousing is an allowed use within these 4 zoning categories, these are the most intense, again, zoning categories that are permitted within the city, and thus align with a more intense general plan land use category within our general plan, the employment or light industrial office land use category. The subject site itself, as well as perhaps most of our CO zoned properties, are aligned with our employment office land use type when looking at it from a general plan land use level. So what's the difference there between those 2 employment categories? So the general plan has land use definitions that can generally be implemented citywide, and a lot of these definitions are by and large general to allow for the various types of uses that may occur within them. In some instances, there are specific land uses highlighted. So when we look at the employment land use category, it has 2 subcategories. On the left, we have the definition for the office subcategory, and on the right, we have the light industrial office subcategory. The applicant site, and again, most of those CO districts citywide are within that employment office subcategory, where these sites should have more residential scale, allow for office uses, accommodate citywide and regional labor pools. Again, more office related. When we look at the light industrial office, again, that more intense office or employment land use subcategory, it specifically states that it provides for opportunities such as warehousing. So we would be typically seeing that warehousing use within the light industrial land use category. So in review of that, the applicant's proposal to include warehousing as an appropriate use within the CO land use or within the CO zoning category would not align with our general plan in terms of these definitions because there is specificity here. With that said, the general plan does include amendment criteria. It is an amendable document. However, our criteria 5 states for the change to the amendment criteria or land use category definitions criteria, a modification to the general plan that includes a text change to the use or intensity of a definition of a general plan land use would necessitate a major general plan amendment. So again, we have these 2 legislative drafts for you here tonight to review. The applicant's draft includes the proposal to include warehouse as a use that could be implemented within the CO zoning district, and then we have the staff's recommended draft that removes that. With staff's recommended draft, this would be able to move forward tonight with your recommendation and go to City Council. By moving forward with the applicant's proposal, a major amendment would have to come along with that request at the text amendment level as well to ensure that all CO districts citywide not only align with this now allowable use, but then again implement our general plan. That concludes my portion of this slide deck. I'm going to hand it over to Meredith Tessier, who will take you through the more regulatory side of this request. So thank you.
Good evening, Chair Scarborough, Vice Chair Young, and Commissioners. Again, Meredith Tessier, Senior Planner with Current Planning Department. I'll begin this segment of the presentation with the Catalyst site. And as you can see, the Catalyst site is zoned commercial office planned community development, which permits retail, office, and residential healthcare type uses. You will also see that the Catalyst site is surrounded by other office uses to the west, north, and east, as well as the southwest portion of the site, but it is also adjacent to a residential district to the southeast portion of the site where you see it's zoned there R5 PCD. Before you is the applicant's site plan, where you'll see warehouses proposed along the perimeter of the site as highlighted in red. We see that this is inconsistent with the framework of the text amendment, which is adaptive reuse. Warehouse is inconsistent with the general plan land use category definition, and also warehousing adjacent to residential is out of character for the general plan land use category of employment office. So we just don't see that that warehouse is compatible to the adjacent uses. Again, we visited this last, on May 28th, some illustrative photos of a site located within the city of Phoenix where it was an office project that was converted to a storage and warehouse facility. As you can see, the development is projecting a industrial type use, therefore resulting in a location that should be more suited for an industrial zoning district. Next two slides are just two sites that we have within the city of Scottsdale that are zoned commercial office that are adjacent to residential districts. Again, just to reiterate, we see that the new warehouse that could be constructed on the site would be inconsistent, again, with this adaptive reuse text amendment. Also would be inconsistent with the general plan land use category of definitions, and once again, not compatible with the surrounding residential character of that area, and inconsistent with the visions of the general plan of employment office. And then here's just another example within the city of Scottsdale where we have commercial office next to single-family residential, where the applicant is proposing within their draft new construction of warehouse adjacent to residential. And that would have those same bullet points that would pertain to our concerns about that. So staff will conclude their presentation on the staff's recommendations slide, which states that staff recommends that the Planning Commission find that zoning text amendment excluding that warehouse, so that's the staff's draft that's attached to the report, finds that it is consistent and conforms with the general plan, and make a recommendation to City Council, again, for staff's draft. So that, again, concludes staff's presentation. The applicant is here and has prepared a full presentation. We'll go into a little further detail of the text amendment and the differences between the two, and we're happy to take questions after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tessier. I do believe we have questions from the commissioners, and I believe the first I've heard is Commissioner Joyner.
Thank you. Thank you. Meredith, did the application we reviewed before have warehousing in it? The warehousing is something that's been added since the last meeting, is that correct?
Chair Scarborough, sorry, is my mic on? It sounds odd. Chair Scarborough, Commissioner Joyner, the former draft did have warehousing on within that.
Because I don't remember us talking about the warehousing, so, okay, well, thank you.
Yes,
Chair Scarborough, Commissioner Joyner, you're correct. There wasn't a lot of time spent on the warehousing portion. A lot of the conversation was about the general plan and about the, I think the applicant spent a lot of time talking about the adaptive reuse of existing buildings. The conversation didn't really get extended to this third piece of the proposed warehousing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other? Oh, thank you. Commissioner Ertel.
This is an even more basic question that I should have asked earlier, I suppose. When you use the term, when the city uses the term warehouse or warehousing, does that include warehouses like, you know, back in, up in the Mac City, north of 101, as well as mini storage, or is it?
sorry, Mike. Chair Scarborough and Commissioner Ertel. I think Mac's concept's more distribution, and this text moving forward, there is more discussion about warehouse purposes, so more of those mini warehouse type concepts.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow that. That's what happened. You would get hearing aids through Amazon.
No problem. So speaking of Amazon, that's more of a distribution center, which is probably comparable to your Mac example that you brought up.
Okay.
Unlike this, I think it's more so the mini warehouse concept where it's just the roll-up garage doors for your Christmas and decoration storage purposes.
So when you say, when the city says warehouse, it simply means mini storage and nothing more than mini storage. Is that correct or not?
So Chair Scarborough and Commissioner Tell, I think it's a very broad term in our zoning code. We really don't break it down into pieces, but certainly the industrial districts that allow warehousing and distribution, certainly you could do some warehousing there without the distribution. Again, it's probably your more intense zoning districts, but even the mini warehousing that have individual storage buildings for household items is considered warehousing. It just doesn't have that distribution component to it. But I think the zoning code really didn't break that down into separate uses because those uses are only allowed in the more intense districts that are typically heavy commercial and industrial.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ortell. Anybody else? Go ahead, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yes, thank you. I had a question about, since we're talking about the warehouses, then what are the hours of the operation of the warehouses? If they're individually have individual owners or renters for those warehouses?
Chair Scarborough and Commissioner Gonzalez, I would defer that question to the applicant to speak more so on the operation side of
Excellent,
things.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. And
Well, perfect. We can have them do a presentation. Do you have any questions for
you
staff
wanna
at
do it?
this point?
Okay, no, if it's just for staff, thank you very much. Do you know if those are individual warehouse spaces, or are they all one key leasehold tenant?
Thank you. I'd again defer that question to the applicant just to kind of
Very
give you
good.
the
Thank you.
details of that operation. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Commissioner Gonzalez. Any other commissioners for staff questions? Okay. Hearing none, then the applicant, if you would please.
Oops. Oh, Meredith, I touched the keyboard. Well, it went away. There it is. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, and Commissioners, thank you for having me back. Again, Carolyn Oberholzer with the law firm of Bergen, Frakes, Smalley, and Oberholzer, 4343 East Camelback. For the last 20 years, I've resided at 9788 East Topaz Drive, which is in walking distance of the Catalyst site. So I am a longtime resident of this community. I would like to supplement what staff gave and what we talked about last time, but we have the benefit of having two new commissioners, so thank you for being here and welcome. I was wondering if necessary, if the chair would indulge me and allow me to present for perhaps 2 minutes extra this evening.
Yeah, we can add 2 minutes to the clock.
Thank you. So again, we really appreciate the time for the continuance. We are here tonight hand in hand with staff on most of this, and as been discussed, we have sticking points on just a few of these items related to our house. I will certainly get to Commissioner Gonzalez's questions in a moment, but just to refresh for the new commissioners, this site has been mostly vacant since 2020. It has been officially vacant since 2022. And the owners have struggled with the next identity for this. There's been a robust leasing effort, and there's just a ton of properties that are similarly situated with vacancies, and it's very hard to get traction and absorption. So the discussion, around that has evolved over time, and this is just a history. We went through it in more detail in the market in more detail last month, just about the value of this property and a huge decline that's occurred because there is a large concentration of CO office in this area. And so we're looking at, well, what can we do to change that and to help the other properties also absorb and get new tenants. So the Catalyst site here is, again, proposed for internalized community storage. That means inside of the building. There's a definition, and I'll take you guys through the definitions in a moment, that speaks to storage as a use that is permitted widely in the city. And then the parking garage that you see on the lower portion, that's where we are implementing the vehicle storage. This site has 2 times the parking requirements for office in the city. There are about 320 spaces in the parking garage. There are another 320 outside of it. And so the reason that we're having this conversation about the addition of mini warehouse, key word being mini, is because we have this abundance of excess parking. And so the idea is to allow for the addition of very low-scale structures that are accessory to the primary use that will enable the storage of the same type of items, not business items, not warehousing, not distribution. It all has to be accessory to the internalized community storage business. And there are limitations that are proposed that will secure this as accessory and not become the type of warehouse uses that are discussed in the general plan. So how your code structures these uses is snapshotted here just with regard to CO. We covered this slide last time, but you'll see green internalized community storage, and you see all of the non-residential districts that it's already allowed in that are not highlighted. So it is widely available in the city. We're adding the uses to it to allow for those accessory uses, and we'll go through those in a moment. This is a lot going on, I know, but it is a compilation of every single use that CO allows is in yellow. So we took them from all the different parts of the zoning ordinance. And there's 3 uses in CO that you can do that you cannot do anywhere else. You can do a veterinary hospital, you can do medical and diagnostic laboratories, and a hospital, but only with a use permit. In all other ways, it's a very common district. All of the other uses that are in red are the districts or the uses that are permitted just about everywhere. So then you look down at the addition of internalized community storage. Again, you see that use is already permitted in many districts. And notably, look at the yellow horizontal line. Office, that use is permitted almost everywhere. So what that does, there's no funnel to create office in these locations. And where we have these CO high concentration areas where you can only have so many animal hospitals and medical and diagnostic laboratories. So that's why we're looking for what is this? What can this be? You'll also notice that multifamily conversion is now a use that you can do in the city, other places. And just on the topic of the general plan, it is general. And not every text amendment and zoning change to the text that applies uniformly across the city can be consistent with every general plan category. We allow daycare uses here with outdoor play areas. Outdoor play areas is different than the office category. There are subsets of these uses that are generalized and they're consistent with a character type. But this general plan conversation is important because it is very broad and it is very general. And I'll get to that again in a moment. But while we're here, again, I cannot underscore the importance of trying to find ways to reoccupy these vacant buildings. This is a highly populated area. There's traffic by it, through it, all the time. We're less than a half a mile from police headquarters, and still it gets broken into all the time. This is just from a few weeks ago. Same pictures I showed you guys last month, but for the benefit of the new commissioners. Again, this is just the slide that staff showed. The concentration of CO you can see around us, the hospitals across the street, and then the gray on the general plan map to the left shows the employment office category. So the questions about uses, Commissioner Ertel and others had questions on what are the difference of these uses. So these are the definitions from your zoning code as to each of these uses. Internalized community storage means it's in an enclosed building. Access to the units is inside, and it can include an office or a dwelling. That is an old school way. Before remote security systems, people used to live at these sites. That is not a thing anymore. Vehicle storage is defined as anywhere where you're parking 4 or more cars. Warehouse is insanely broad. There is no subset of definitions for warehouse, and that's why we find ourselves in this position tonight with the general plan. Warehouse just means a building or buildings used for the storage of goods of any type, so not business to business, not my personal things. It's any type, and where no retail operation is conducted. And there's no parking standard for office. Mini warehouse is not defined in the code, but it is treated separately for purposes of parking. And for the parking calculation associated with mini warehouse, it also provides for an office calculation. There is an office associated with this whole development. The mini storage is functionally the same thing as internalized community storage. It's just how do you access your unit? So when we look back and forth to where we've been, I do have the original text on the left, the proposed text on the right, with each one of these, which each component of the text amendment. As staff outlined, we did broaden this. We took out the minimum lot size requirement. We took out the maximum building height requirement. And instead, we added that this is a conversion-only option, that it can only be converted when convincing staff that it's functionally or economically obsolete, and that it does not permit any additional building area for internalized community storage other than what exists today. This is only for the reoccupancy of a formerly occupied building as an office. So it's very limited. It creates a new use in the zoning code. It is a very unique new use specific only to CO. And then it provides that all loading areas have to be a certain distance from residential districts. We are clear of that by a long shot, but as staff mentioned, there might be other sites where you would need to have these additional setbacks that would be triggered. Then the vehicle storage component, we tailored this a bit to provide for, again, additional distance requirements where there is proximate residential. All of our immediately adjacent properties are church or office uses. No additional vehicle storage areas can go beyond the existing parking areas of the site. So basically, it's, again, the focus is reusing what you already have. Let's reuse what you have. Everything that is out in the parking field at a certain distance from residential also requires a carport structure. So those are the distinctions. Everything about limiting these, no RVs, no trailers, no ATVs, that all stays. They have to be operable. And then this goes on to then require additional wall. If you're going to have a wall over 3 feet, it has to be 40 feet back from any property line, and then it requires exterior lighting with the cutoff requirements in line with the zoning ordinance. And again, staff and us in total agreement with all of these things, of all of these changes. It's this slide where we have a difference, and this is where warehouse is permitted only as an accessory use. Accessory in your zoning ordinance is defined as a use that is clearly subordinate to the use that is primary on the lot or the building. So what we've structured here still is that it has to be on the same lot for the same property where the internalized community storage is happening, and that you have to have a maximum of 30% of the building, the existing building, internalized community storage building. You can't have more than 30% of the property go to this mini warehouse use. It still limits the buildings to 12 feet, which keeps it in residential character, and we're providing for breaks in the buildings every 200 feet for landscaping. So it's very, very tailored to a residential character, and it is subordinate to the main use on the site, which would be internalized community storage. Staff took you through the general plan category. It hits on that office allows a variety of office uses, and we do have an office use. This is moderate traffic volume. It is actually very low. It is located along a collector or arterial, and it is near residential areas. So this is consistent with the general plan. I think I have touched on all of this. The general plan also speaks to coming up with innovative adaptive reuse, and again, because of the limitations in CO, this is a very good implementation of this general plan policy that is seeking to adjust the districts to adapt to the new economic climate. Again, this is the Catalyst site, the distinction of where those mini warehouse buildings would be in relation to the larger buildings on the site to highlight, again, this is accessory only to those uses. The text requires that they be architecturally consistent with those uses. That's going to all be subject to your design review board. Again, this is the office building. I would love to have my storage in this type of a building versus the one we currently have, which in 15 years I've never gone to. My husband gets to do that, but if it was here, it's a much friendlier environment, and it will really create, I think, a new standard for storage, and that will be unique. Again, we had a traffic study done. The difference between office and this use is a reduction in 4,700 vehicle trips per day. As to the Catalyst site, the McCormick Ranch Property Owners Association has reviewed this entire package, including the mini storage. They've approved it. And again, we have community support. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions. Our project team is both here and online, and thank you again for allowing me that additional time.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and start with Commissioner Gonzalez. You can go ahead with your questioning of the applicant.
Okay, basically, what are the hours of operation?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Gonzalez, the typical hours for storage facilities are 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Every operator is different, but those are the typical hours.
The outside storage, will they be accessible at any time or 24-hour basis for the renters to get into? Or are they limited to those office hours?
So, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, as to the Catalyst site, this would be a gated, there would be gates installed at 2 of the entrances, and those gate accesses would only be openable to tenants during the business hours of the operation. So if they close at 8, then those gates don't allow access at 8.
Okay. Then is there any additional, because you have the space, are you anticipating any outside storage?
No, that was strictly prohibited in the text amendment, and so there is no possibility for outdoor storage anywhere on this property if the commission recommends this text amendment.
Will you be anticipating any commercial renters, like of commercial vehicles, to be utilizing the storage area?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, no, these are for personal vehicle storage.
Will you have any limitations on what type of vehicles will be stored there, like electrified vehicles and stuff like that?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, there is no limitation on if they're gas-powered or electric-powered. There would most certainly be electric-powered, and we have part of the sustainability requirements of the city when we come through with a development proposal, not in the text amendment, but outside of it, would be that a certain portion of the parking areas are equipped with chargers or be EV capable. But as to the restrictions on the type of vehicles that can go within this, the vehicle storage text specifically provides that the stored vehicles have to be operational, there is no repair or maintenance, and that it specifically excludes the storage of RVs, this is an H on the screen, RVs, all-terrain vehicles, boats, trailers, heavy or light equipment vehicles, and also excludes the storage of household items. So it's vehicles only.
Will there be any outside charging stations within that vehicle storage area?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, as to this site, I'm not sure yet.
Okay, and I guess my question there again is, you said you're going to have a gated system there that will cut off hours of outside the 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. hours, so you won't be getting people coming in at 10 o'clock at night and going through their storage area or something like that in a residential area?
Correct, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The way that this site functions is it has several access points. The Mountain View access point would be gated. The 92nd Street frontage, 90th Street frontage has 2 access points. One goes behind the building, and that's where the gate would be. The other comes around to the front of the building, and that's where customer arrival, going into the office, checking in, that's where that would happen. That is the only area of the project that would be unsecured and remain open after business hours. And so there is no access to the building from that point either. But I just wanted to highlight that at least with regard to the Catalyst site, there is an area that does remain open, but there's not access to anything from that location.
Okay, and then the hours of operation are I guess, the front entranceway where people could be utilizing the internal storage, they're not going to be allowed to come in after 8 p.m. at night?
Correct. And that's typical of this operator. Again, other operators, this is a citywide text amendment. There's nothing in the text amendment that speaks to hours of operation. You know, if that's something that's important to the commission, it's certainly a component that we can discuss. We just didn't think to add that.
I think it might be pertinent to the residents in the area. That's why I asked.
Within the residential, within a proximity of residential, to limit the hours to after a certain period of time, I think is something we can work with.
Is there any specific, let me ask a question of staff. Is there any particular light levels that are to be shown as far as the illumination of the side structures and anything like that? Or are they going to have pole lighting at, you know, in the parking lot, or how are they going to do the illumination?
Thank you, Chair Scarborough and Commissioner Gonzalez. They'll be required to conform with the ordinance requirements for lighting standards, so it needed to be full cutoff and meet with our required minimum foot candles for that site.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that a little bit, but you know, what concerns me is having 24-hour illumination of, you know, solar type lighting going on with sodium lights on the side of a warehouse space on a building this large. That's all I'm saying is the illumination. Not necessarily that it casts a lot of illumination out, but it just lights up the whole building all over the sides. That's what I was looking at so much.
Certainly, I think the code does speak to some security lighting purposes, but maybe that's also a customized criteria that could be added as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Gonzalez. Real quick, I got a question for staff, but if somebody could put the slide back up where we had the definitions, that would be great. I don't know if that was, I think that was part of Ms. Oberholzer's presentation, but if you could bring that slide back up that had the definitions of each one of these items, especially the warehouse.
Are you looking for the definitions on staff slide?
If it was your slide, I thought it might have been her slide.
I believe it's, did you have a definition slide? Okay, sorry. It's the applicant slide.
I think that was in Ms. Oberholzer's.
Yeah, I agree.
Caroline, do you know the slide number by any chance?
Huh?
Do you know the slide number?
I have to advance to it. Is that okay?
She'll set it advance.
I think it was hers, but we'll see here. It's right here.
I believe this is the slide.
This is it. Thank you so much. And this is a question for staff. Anybody on staff feel free to answer this. But if this project defined the warehouse component as mini warehouse, would it then not be in compliance with CO zoning and not need to have a general plan amendment as suggested? Because if it's labeled as mini warehouse, it would be reviewed as internal community storage, which is allowed by CO.
Thank you, Chair Scarborough. We would still see it the same way in terms of the definition within the general plan. The definition in the general plan says warehousing, just as the permitted use list only says warehousing as well. So we would treat it the same. So we would need to, again, amend the employment office definition to allow for that. When we were reviewing the applicant's request in terms of adaptive reuse, they are moving forward with an adaptive reuse of the existing office building, which we see keeping in character with the office, again, land use and also the CO district. They're also adaptively reusing the parking lot and parking structure. But in terms of the warehousing, one, it doesn't align with the definition, and two, it's new building footprint. So it doesn't really align, again, with that adaptive use discussion as well.
That's a side argument. I could opine over the idea that you're adaptively reusing the parking lot to put a structure there that could better be used for the citizenry. But I guess my question then is, it seems like we have a hole in the code here where we have mini warehouse being defined as the equivalent of internalized community storage. And so we have a conflict within the ordinance. And so I'm just curious, how do we resolve this conflict where one side could argue that by definition here, this is not an issue, and yet staff is arguing the other side. So it seems like we have a hole in the ordinance in terms of definition of warehouse versus mini warehouse, because right here it says mini warehouse is to be reviewed as internalized community storage. So I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
So Chair Scarborough, members of the commission, so mini warehouse, as made clear here, is not defined in the zoning code. And so it's,
Use is
That's-
functionally the same as internalized community storage.
so
So there's a text amendment. Could the text amendment not define mini warehouse and bypass the general plan need?
you could conceive a text amendment that we don't have that in the proposal yet to have a new definition for the mini warehouse. But functionally, when you look at internalized community storage, it is not accessed from interior to a building, so it's not the same.
Understood, but it says use is functionally the same as internalized community storage, so.
Oh, that's me editorializing, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I apologize.
So
So
I-
that is not part of the true definition.
No, that is true. That is, sorry, because there is no definition.
Okay.
So this is me saying there's no definition, and we are saying it's functionally the same. So I wanted to make that
Thank you for that clarity. Yeah, and your slide next time, I would make sure that you change the color, you change how it's written here,
Absolutely.
so it's clearer. Point still stands, though, if mini warehouse is not defined, should it not be defined? It feels like there's a hole in the zoning ordinance here that we should have that definition understood. And frankly, the idea that we have warehousing for, I guess what I'd call it residential or mini storage versus commercial warehousing, it feels like there needs to be a bifurcation of that term regardless. Is that at least a fair thought?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I think it is a fair thought, certainly. It's something that hasn't been an issue because we haven't been looking at adding this type of warehousing in different zoning districts that would need to contemplate, hey, do we need to create new definitions? One of the concerns would be is still, if you create a new land use category called mini warehouse with its definition, then trying to decide what zoning districts that would be allowed in. I'm not so sure that putting it into a CO district, for instance, would be consistent with the general plan for the reasons that we've already discussed. So it would probably just be duplicative of the basic warehouse definition. Certainly, it could be contemplated if this mini warehouse, which is, a lot of people talk about the old school self-storage units, we could have a whole conversation of what zoning districts that would be allowed in. I think historically in Scottsdale, they have been in the industrial districts, and I think moving forward, there would be a sentiment that this still should be in the industrial districts.
And I think that review has only been by reviewing warehouses as a whole. And I'm suggesting that there needs to be a bifurcation of mini warehouse versus warehouse. And I think when you split those out, I think the review of that use would be wildly different than how staff has reviewed it so far. Because you have to look at it from a holistic perspective of what a warehouse is. And that, as we can see, is wildly different than what's being proposed here. We're talking about mini storage, mini warehousing, not your typical industrial heavy use warehousing distribution setup. So I guess I'm just arguing or discussing here out loud of how much of the staff's position is predicated on the more intense version of warehousing versus what I'm suggesting of the need to bifurcate the term warehousing. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It's not included in the proposals. We're talking about something that hasn't specifically been proposed, but you're right, in the context of this specific application to the Catalyst site, they're looking at mini warehousing without a definition for that mini warehousing. But again, it's a good conversation. It would probably be a different type of community conversation about the mini warehouses and where they should be located, and are they that much different than other warehouses in terms of the the bays and the rolling up and the rolling up of the doors and the noise associated with that, and then the vehicles moving in and out and what types of vehicles are moving in and out. Usually vans or large structures moving in household goods or office goods in and out of these smaller mini warehouse type units. So it's something that we haven't really discussed from a community standpoint.
Yeah, so this is where I struggle because I really like the project. I think it's a great adaptive use at this location. I'm just still struggling with the path that this is going through to be buttoned up from a general plan and text amendment perspective. And I'm just trying to figure out what's the easiest path to effectuate this adaptive reuse from my perspective. This is where I struggle. I think the pathing is difficult here. If a general plan amendment was needed, then that should have been part of this application from the get-go with whatever text amendments were needed. And it feels like we're just trying to figure out how to make this work. And so, I mean, I'm looking at this project and I really do like it. And I'm just wondering if there's even a path. And again, as the applicant, you don't have to answer this right now. But where the warehousing gets peeled right now until it goes through the proper process from staff's perspective in terms of getting the right text amendments or general plans processed, and you move forward with the other elements of this project. You don't have to answer that right now. Those are just my thoughts. And I'll go ahead and let another commissioner speak. Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair Scarborough. Thank you for the presentation. I'm curious, the 30% number that you came up with, is that because what you were able to get to fit on your site?
Mr. Chair and Vice Chair, so when we originally made this proposal, which it started in the fall of last year, we struggled with the path. We saw the hole that you see. And when we talked about accessory uses, and I'm looking at the definition of clearly subordinate, I wanted it to be far lower than half. The original configuration of the mini storage was not done with that 30%, because then as we went through staff review and they added recommendations of break the buildings up every 200 feet, you need to have landscaping, that chips away at what could be there. But what we are comfortable proceeding with is 30%. We can fit that on the site. It does magically fit into the number because the building is 115,000 square feet, so that 30% is keyed to the number of that building. And that is also trying to keep it within the scale. It's tied, the language is tied to that building because we didn't want it to be able to dominate in relation to the other buildings on the site. Also, staff does have a policy document, the self-storage facilities design guidelines, that apply to the internalized community storage. And when we were scouring the ordinance for the words mini warehouse to try and tie this all together, we didn't, the only reference we found was that parking, and so I apologize, I created confusion on that language there. But the self-storage guidelines do say in the second sentence of the document, under self-storage land use, these facilities are referenced as internalized community storage in the city's zoning ordinance and can also be referred to as mini warehouses. So I think there's this, it's a use distinction, but the exterior access changes it. And so that 30%, again, is the adaptive reuse of that parking area because we have such an abundance of parking. When it doesn't go to office, the reason why we have 4,700 fewer trips a day is because we don't have employees coming there to park all the time. So trying to figure out what else to put there, trying to keep it within the scale of the community. 30% works for the site, and we felt like it worked with the definition of accessory.
Okay. Do you have maximum and minimum unit sizes for this mini warehouse concept?
Not in this draft of the text amendment.
Okay, and that leads me to my next question is if, we'll just use round numbers, if you got a 100,000 square foot internalized self-storage facility, you could effectively have a 30,000 square foot warehouse with a single user.
So these would all have to be on the same site.
Sure.
I suppose that we could add language to tie it to, the primary use on the site is internalized community storage, but I think what you're keying on is is the primary business. It has to be accessory to that same business. So maybe that clarification addresses a concern that you would have a separate business that would be able to locate on the site.
Well,
for
I
mini
guess
storage.
I would be concerned, I think this is probably staff's concern, is that if, like I said, if you've got 100,000 square foot internalized self-storage,
Yeah.
and then you've got a 30,000 square foot warehouse, you're getting into a sort of a use situation where it's more akin to a, we won't call it distribution, but
Sure.
it's warehousing a lot of stuff for a single user.
So,
And I'm having a little bit of, because it's a little open-ended there, and I think if there was a way to, as Chair Scarborough alluded to, to define this mini warehouse concept a little bit more clearly, that there was a minimum or maximum size per unit for these, that I think, and again, staff would need to work through the semantics of all this, but I think we're getting kind of caught up on definitions, but they're important.
yes, and I think
I
that.
mean, they're
that
very
we
important.
Can do that. I
Yeah.
think that having a standard size is certainly something that we can incorporate. How we tried to get at the scale to prevent the 30,000 square foot building, again, is just they're limited to 12 feet in height.
Yeah.
So, and these breaks, but if we want to introduce a maximum size or a minimum or both, I think that that's an industry standard that's easy to arrive at. And, if the motion were to be, I know you're struggling with how do we move this forward, if there's the will to do so, you could move it forward always with the recommendation of a modification. And so if your modifications that you recommend are the addition of some size limitations or requirements, I don't see an issue with it from the broader application of it.
Okay. All right, I think that's all the questions I have for now.
Mr. Chairman, before you pull for more questions, just wanted to remind you of the last meeting that we had about the adaptive reuse of the buildings and the compelling argument about, hey, depending on the market demand, if the market demand is less for office, it's important to take some of these existing buildings and adaptively reuse them into the, in this case, the internalized community storage. And so since that meeting, there's been a lot of work to get toward that under that concept. What the concern is when you're talking about the adaptive reuse concept is if you start taking away parking that was for the office and you start putting structures where that parking was, that office building would much less likely be converted back to an office if the market were to change, because now that parking lot is dominated by structures. So if there's a concern about having that flexibility, tolerating some storage uses that weren't originally allowed in the CO district, but because of the market demands for the building might change from time to time, you start building more structures where that parking was for the employees and so forth, changing that back to the office, which was a compelling argument at the last meeting. You lose those opportunities because those structures all have already been constructed to take up that parking. So that was a concern. We had offered just additional vehicle storage on that surface parking lot that you could rent out that wouldn't necessarily impact the site as much and wouldn't create additional structures that would be maybe cost prohibitive of just changing it back to an office if the market changed. And in order to implement the commercial office purpose, that's what I just wanted to remind us of how we as a staff got comfortable with that adaptive reuse based on the conversation with the Planning Commission last time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, Mr. Curtis. Do I have any other commissioners that have questions? Yes. Go ahead, Commissioner Joyner, then Commissioner Tell afterwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great presentation. And I'm not sure if my question is for staff or for Carolyn. I've heard various numbers between the last meeting and this meeting. How many properties in Scottsdale, if the text amendment was passed, would this impact? And am I correct that if the text amendment passed, we would not have an opportunity to look at additional cases as they came through? They would have it by right. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair Scarborough, Commissioner Joyner. Yes, we reviewed from a citywide standpoint. We're at about 683 properties citywide that are CO. As you can see by what's being proposed by the applicant, it would be a permitted use for those properties that already have an existing office building. And as a result of that, then they could have a permitted use of having vehicular storage, and in the instance of what the applicant is proposing, warehousing or mini warehousing as well.
Thank you. As I said at the last meeting, I really like this application, and I actually went to the doctor today and drove right across the street, sat in the parking lot in the little covered garage, and I thought about it. So I wish you would have just brought this through for that application. I think you would be done with us by now. But I've sat on the dais long enough that I've seen lots of unintended consequences come, and I am just not comfortable with 683 properties not being subject to neighborhood comments, lighting. We've already talked about lighting, and I'm concerned about that for market condition changes and neighborhood input. So, but thank you for the question. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Joyner. Commissioner Ertel?
Thank you, Chair. Most of my questions have been asked and answered. I guess, I have comments on, Director Curtis says, well, if the market changes, the owner is going to have difficulty going back to office. But I think that's really a burden for the owner, not for the city. If the owner does something that puts himself at a disadvantage sometime in the unforeseeable future, that's on him, not on the city. I do appreciate what Commissioner Joyner says. Opening this up for all 683 properties, I don't philosophically have a problem with that because, okay, it provides predictability. But as she says, there's going to be neighborhood considerations, lighting, that sort of thing, that might be subject to, correct me if I'm wrong on this, operating permit. The lighting would be subject to the DR.
It wouldn't go to DR.
Wouldn't it go to DR?
Mr. Chair? Sorry, Commissioner Ertel, if I may. There is a DR component here. In the text amendment, it does require when you add the buildings, it does have to go through design review. So there is neighborhood outreach that happens with that, and we did do that with regard to this site, and that's why. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, that was, at a higher level, my issues, thoughts, whatever. You did say, I believe, that there is a traffic access point on Mountain View, which is right adjacent to the residential area. Is there any way to avoid that?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, that is a major collector, and that would be a gated access. So we're not able to close off that access because the other access is also gated. We have to have two ways in and out when they're gated to secure the site and also to secure the vehicles. But that gating does restrict the ingress-egress to that far more than if it, went to office or any other use,
Sure.
Where you wouldn't have it be secured. I am on that street every day, and it's not a street that really gets a ton of traffic anyway. It's 90th certainly does around the hospital, but the key is balancing with the access is also making sure that people can get safely in and out, but
Right.
that the things that are inside stay there and are secure.
Right, well, Director Curtis made the point about the noise of doors going up and down, and I was thinking, if you were able to put trees across that area, then that would absorb some of the sound. But I guess you can't do that. I'm with whoever said it. This would have been nice if it came through as a, one-off proposal as opposed to an entire text amendment. I don't know. After last meeting, I knew exactly how I felt about it. And, pardon me. And then as I go through this at home, I know exactly, but it's the other way. Coming in here, I'm going back and forth. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Ertel. Do we have any other comments? Commissioner Drake?
Well, I have to say, I share Commissioner Joyner's opinion that the text amendment could affect all those other properties. And so that's what I'm concerned about. I think this is a really neat situation, but it's just fitting for this one particular property. And the ramifications could far outlast or move on throughout all these other properties, or projects that could come, and we wouldn't be able to have any input on it. So that is my biggest concern.
Thank you, Commissioner Drake. Commissioner Reed, do you have any thoughts? Not at the moment. Commissioner Ertel?
Back again. Sure. The chair had suggested working the definition in for mini storage into this, which I think is a great idea. Is that something that would take another month or so to work out?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Ertel, so the way that we had structured this originally was that the mini warehouse component went under internalized community storage because there wasn't a definition of mini warehouse. I think it would be very easy to either go back to that, keep it as is, and just come up with a definition of mini warehouse to add to this either within the use table, because I think the unique thing we have here is this is internalized community conversion storage. So it would be unique to CO, different from internalized community storage in the rest of the city that does not have to go to these little Ps that are on that use table right here. I'll go back to here, P19, 20, and 21.
Right.
We created those to give these subsets for these accessory uses, but that can easily be converted into definitions as well. It's the path that the chair mentioned earlier.
Right.
And so as you see here, internalized community storage in green is a P with no little number on it everywhere else. It has a little number on it here because we're creating a new definition for internalized community storage conversion, which is different than all the others. So we can put mini storage under that new use as one path, and it would be the same structure that we have. It's just it becomes a part of P19 instead of its own, which would be under warehouse here. So this, I think, slide helps you just because it shows you the other instances where there's a number next to something indicating that in that district, it's a little different. So I think we could handle it that way. There's any number of ways.
That sounds reasonable to me. We've talked before about the general plan and so forth and so on, and I remember when that was being promoted, when it was being sold, it was the idea this is an aspirational document. This is an aspirational document. It is not a set of rules per se. That's how it was sold at any rate. I think once it gets passed, then we tend to look at it as a set of rules, but still, it's an aspirational document. And, we need to fit the times. if you could work on the definition, and one of the reasons I appreciate lawyers, you're a lawyer, right? Because you're precise with words. For the most part, lawyers are precise with words. The planners are good with the rules. Both sides are important. But I think I hate to say it, if we took another month and you worked on the definition and they looked at the other 682 properties and with the idea of how could we clarify and maintain community wishes. I don't know how better to say that. It doesn't bother me that we would never get to look at those other 682 properties. The way I view it, government's job is not to, micromanage, to look at everything possible, but to come up with the rules that people can look at and say, okay, yeah, I can do this based on the rules. And we don't need to get more approval, more expensive approval. But at any rate, I would propose a continuance. I don't know, this is not a proposal, I'm just kind of talking out loud so the chair can decide how we do this. Take another month. I hate to do that, we're stretching this out forever. It all costs the owner. But I think we do need clarification both in terms of mini storage and in how it affects the other 682 properties.
Mr. Chairman.
One second. Commissioner Attell, you're done? Okay, Commissioner Joyner, go ahead.
We have two things here. We have a text amendment that applies to 683 properties, and we have a case that I think the majority of us agree on. And I am not a proponent of a continuance because this is the same conversation we had at our last meeting. I would like you to come back with this application at that address. I think it's a great use of that. I am not a proponent of text amendments that apply to 683 properties. And no, I don't want to see 683 files either, but I think it's too vague. So anyway, that's just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. For staff, based on what Commissioner Joyner is asking and Commissioner Ertel, what is staff's view of the most expeditious path forward from the comments you're hearing?
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, with Commissioner Ertel's proposal, you'd be looking at a continuance to a date certain, which would be August 13th or August 27th. That would be a time frame. Certainly, this applicant team has been easy to work with. We could, not knowing, Ms. Holberholzer's schedule in terms of the summer schedule, hopefully we could just get back to working with perhaps a new definition, a new land use specification for the mini warehouse. We could look at a variety of things regarding that. And so the next available meeting would be August 13th if the commission so desires to work with the applicant on a continuance. I don't know where the applicant team is on their desire for a continuance, but that obviously is an important function of this conversation.
And that would be sufficient to negate staff's concerns regarding a general plan amendment?
So that's something that we would have to look at to see if there is a concept regarding a mini warehouse and how that would affect any sort of implementation of the general plan. Something that we haven't really talked about, but clearly you saw the general plan definitions with regard to the offices, and it does say warehouse. And so we'd have to think about the scope and intent of what a new definition would be and continue working with the applicant team, perhaps on minimizing the impacts associated with that.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that it doesn't potentially solve the problem. It's a continuance that gets us to potentially another hearing without getting the case to be able to move forward either with a approval or a recommendation for approval or a recommendation of denial. That sounds like there might still be more work that has to be done from a general plan amendment perspective that may not get ironed out by the date certain.
Yes, without knowing a little bit more about the definition, we may still have an issue with the general plan.
Okay, and then Commissioner Joyner had her opinions and thoughts in terms of this being a very site-specific application. What's the quickest, easiest path for the applicant to achieve that, where we're not doing a text amendment that effectuates 600-plus properties?
Well, Mr. Chairman, there's a couple thoughts about that. One would be rezoning this property, which would basically start over, and that would be a much lengthier process with the public outreach and everything, 6 to 9 months. Another thought that was that you've seen and is built into the code is for some of the more land uses that are debatable whether they'll be compatible with the neighborhood or not. The one-offs would be the conditional use permit requirement for something like the mini warehouse component of this. That doesn't necessarily get you out of the general plan issue as it's defined currently in the general plan, but those are also tools to help assure compatibility, particularly if it's new construction as opposed to just adaptively reusing the building. Just some thoughts that we would probably be working toward and to try to make sure that we're always consistent with the general plan and that we're protecting the community's interests in terms of impacts.
And just to be clear, the point of contention is the warehousing component, not the other components of this project.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, based on the commission's conversation a few weeks ago and the desire for additional opportunities built into the code for adaptively reusing some buildings.
Okay. So I guess I would just ask, just a second, Commissioner Reed. I'll let you, just a second, Mr. Reed. The reason I'm asking all this is so that we have a little bit better basis of understanding for everybody up here and even the public at large. And so staff is saying they're comfortable moving it forward without the warehousing component. And I guess I would just like to ask the question to Commissioner Joyner, Commissioner Reed, and anybody else who'd like to comment. Is your point of contention the warehousing alone? Or are you fine with the other elements of it? So if the project moved forward without the warehousing and
This project?
The text amendment?
No, I'm not comfortable with the text.
Okay, so that's the question. So go ahead, Commissioner Reed.
Well, I'm in agreement. I'm very supportive of the proposal. I'm not supportive of the warehousing and the text amendment. They're two separate issues, in my mind, anyway.
Okay. Commissioner Joyner.
I'm done.
Okay, Commissioner Joyner has nothing to say. Perfect. No worries. All right. So right now we are at a point here where does the applicant have anything further she would like to add at the moment before we let the commissioners make a motion?
Famous last words, Mr. Chair. These will be my last words. Thank you so much for your careful deliberation about this again and spending the time on it. I realize we're trying to solve for a problem that really is citywide. It's not just particular to this property. When you do a text amendment, you have to say, do you have a catalyst site? So that's why we have all the focus on our particular site. But when we do look at that site and the other options, I just bring everybody back to the land use table and to look at the areas in green that match with the areas in yellow and all of the places in the city where you can currently do internalized community storage and also office. When we look at where the option is to do, if we're going to treat warehouse as mini storage as warehouse, we have fewer options. That's C3, C4, I1, and IG. But IG does not allow internalized community storage. So when we were looking at rezoning the property, we were left with C3, C4, and I1, all to keep an office building functionally intact. So for this reason, and because of the commercial office district being so limited, we thought we would solve a citywide problem with the commercial office because there is need for more uses in that category. But a use permit to handle this storage issue, I think, is something we could absolutely work on. I understand that's not going to solve the concerns for some of the commissioners, but we're open to however the pleasure of the commission is. But if you wanted to continue us to the 13th, I think there's a path where we could develop a use permit structure for the mini storage component. I think we've shown this commission that we work really well together and quickly together if given the time. However, if that's not the pleasure, then, you know, however you move forward. But I just wanted to, again, thank you, and I know it's not easy, and I really appreciate that the ways that you're thinking about us and challenging us to come up with the best solution.
Thank you for that. I agree that we need a catalyst site, and that it is the job of the Planning Commission to recommend approval or denial of text amendments for the city. So this is being presented as a text amendment. While there's a catalyst site in play, this is a text amendment that's going to affect the entire city. And so that is well within what we're supposed to be doing here. And so that doesn't bother me at all. I like the conditional use permit add-on personally, just that way, while it probably adds a little bit more bureaucracy, it also allows projects to come forward and have more touch points with the citizenry. Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Just a clarification on what you just said. So you said a use permit about the mini storage. Did you mean the mini warehouse?
Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Vice Chair.
Sorry, we're talking about all these definitions, and I just want to make sure we're all clear about what is what.
The exterior access limited to 12 feet in height, building size, accessory, those things.
Okay,
that accessory would be the use permit.
Okay.
Yes.
Even
wanted to make sure
attorneys
we
are
weren't-
subject to correction.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Do we have any other commissioners that have comments before we seek a motion? Hold on, for comments, Commissioner Gonzalez, it's a comment? Okay.
I just want to wish the applicant to pursue this more. You know, I don't want you to get too depressed over it because it's really a decent application, but yet because of the conflicts that there's going on, plus the broad spectrum, makes it very difficult because we just don't have to, we can't just look at this one particular project. If we really like it or don't like it, we have to look at what the citywide projection will be. And that's what makes it so difficult. So I really ask you to come back, work with the staff, work the differences out, and I'm sure you could probably get something done next time.
Thank you, Commissioner Gonzalez. Yes, this is a text amendment that's coming before Planning Commission. So should this be continued or heard, I just would like to remind the Planning Commission that it gets reviewed as a text amendment that has a catalyst site. So as we're reviewing this as a Planning Commission, I hope we are reviewing it as a true text amendment and not as a specific site project. We all like the site project, but it really is a text amendment. Go ahead, Mr. Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as you're thinking about a motion and obviously the applicant team, and if they're willing to have this continued, one of the things that we always have to deal with is public outreach, notification. And so we want to build in enough time if we do a continuance to make sure that we advertise correctly. And as we've advertised this so far, we never really advertised the section of the code that deals with definitions. And so we probably need to build in enough time to make sure that we have the appropriate advertisement and posting, that we would be adding a definition or changing the definition section or something like that. And so with that being said, we're probably looking at later in August to build time quickly in the next couple weeks to figure out what we need to advertise so we make sure that we have and cure the appropriate notification of that. And even that's a time frame. So I just want to build that in. You have the option of doing a continuance with no date to be determined while the applicant and staff figure out exactly what we need to do to advertise this, to cure this of any sort of noticing flaws. And we definitely don't want to go through all of this and then have a noticing flaw. So you may not need to focus on a date certain if there is a conversation about a continuance, but certainly that needs to be coming from the applicant team. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Joyner.
So the motion that's in our agenda is on the text amendment, not on a continuance. So should we not vote on the text amendment first and then talk about the continuance?
Only the text amendment is on the agenda. Whether we continue the text amendment would be the consideration. We can either approve modification, deny, or continue.
Okay, but the text amendment would still come back for all 300 and some properties, right?
Correct, but keep in mind,
600 properties.
yeah, based on the ordinance and the bylaws, the applicant is requesting an action. The applicant hasn't requested a continuance yet, so you'd want to make sure that the applicant is requesting that continuance if that's how you wish to move forward. But you're right, this conversation is solely about the text amendment, the pieces of the text amendment. What was in our staff report, which is in front of you in terms of the motion sheet, is the staff's recommendation for approval of the text amendment,
Right.
excluding the mini warehouse. So that's what's on your motion sheet right now. And none of this includes any sort of rezoning of the specific property, because that would be a whole separate process.
Okay, so if, just saying hypothetically, if someone made a motion to deny this application that includes the text amendment, how would that impact the applicant in doing a continuance of just their case, the specific property that's tied to this case?
Commissioner Joyner, I'll step in on that one
Thank
since
you.
we're dealing with sort of parliamentary procedure. Right now, the sheet that's in front of you is just recommended language for if you wanted to make that motion. At this time, there's no motion pending. If one of the commission members were to make a motion to deny and that motion were to carry, the application at that point would have a recommendation of denial. I think at that point we'd be done with this proceeding. It would just get forwarded on to City Council
Right.
according to normal procedure. And at that point, City Council could
Right.
make their own determination.
Okay.
Chair?
Yes, sir?
I think Director Curtis said that, or somebody said that the applicant would have to request a continuance. I thought that I had heard Ms. Oberholzer say earlier that she wanted or was open to a continuance. Is that the same thing as saying, I want a continuance?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I think it's and this is, I defer to your attorney, on your ability to make motions. I think the commission has the ability to make their own motion for a continuance, and we also have the ability to request one. But if the commission would like to continue the case, we do not have any objection to that. I think that the time period within which we could work to address the issues we heard tonight around storage are probably best handled with the addition of a use permit, as was mentioned, as a concept. I think that's a pretty easy change. As Mr. Curtis mentioned, though, if we get into other sections of the ordinance and they have to renotice, I'm with him that we wouldn't want to set a date that we couldn't meet. So I think maybe in that event, the 13th is a little aggressive, but the 27th of August works, and it keeps us all moving forward. So we would be fine with that.
So you're saying you'd like a continuance to August 27th. Did that work for you, Mr. Curtis?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, and Commissioner Tell specifically, I think what works better is a date not to be determined, because we're not quite sure what section of the codes would be changing. And believe it or not, we run out of time really quickly with regard to public outreach, notification, and working with the newspaper on publishing the notice.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner.
Would it be better for us, I don't know what the rest, everybody's going to vote, but let's say we deny this, it's still going to go to city council and get a read of what the current council is going to feel about this before a whole lot of attorney hours and applicant hours and staff hours are spent?
Commissioner Joyner, it's sort of a non-legal issue. It certainly sounds like a possibility.
Right.
You know, because this is a recommending body, city council would not be tied by a recommendation of denial. So you could certainly make a motion to deny the application as currently submitted, make that recommendation, and then council has the independent authority that they can continue it. The applicant can request a continuance at that stage. So those steps can still happen, whether or not that's what this body wants to do. I
Right,
can't really.
because that way the applicant would get the feel of the current city council much quicker and without spending lots of lawyer hours on trying to figure out something, and then still work on getting the definitions changed for the future use and things like that. Okay, I'm ready to make
So
a
real
motion.
quick, I'm going to pause you there, because
Okay.
again, there is no specific application here. So for them to do a specific application would take roughly about 9 months to engage. So there is no specific application, it's just a text amendment. So getting a gauge on this is not related to a specific project.
But
just so
city
you understand.
council would have to vote on a text amendment as well, is that not correct?
Yes, Commissioner Joyner, Chair Scarborough, just to clarify, although we are talking about a zoning ordinance text amendment, it is still initiated by an application. So,
Right.
you know, you can have an application for a rezoning or an application for a text amendment. So normally text amendments are initiated by staff and you don't have an application, but in this situation we do. So there is an application. It's just sort of a language thing. It's
But
ultimately.
city council would still be making the final decision regardless of what we say, right?
Correct.
All right, thank you. If anybody has a motion.
I do.
I'll entertain a motion.
Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea to just punt to the city council. I mean, that's why we get the free dinners, to do the best we can. So I would make a motion to continue Case 6 TA 2024. Help me with this, attorneys. For a date to be determined in the nearest possible future. Expedite this to resolve the definitional issues of mini storage and to clarify potential impacts on the other 682 properties. Not a very good motion, but it's the best I can do, buddy.
It's okay, Commissioner Ertel. Just to clarify, I believe what we have is a motion to continue to a date to be determined, subject to the conditions you've indicated. Before we get to a second, it is an unusual wrinkle of the rules of procedure for Planning Commission, but for Planning Commission to continue on its own, it does have to be done at the applicant's request. So I would just like Ms. Overholtzer to clarify whether or not that is technically at applicant's request.
Thank you. Okay, so that is the answer to the earlier question. Mr. Chair and Commissioner Ertel, I appreciate the direction for us during the continuance period. When we do indefinite continuances, it requires that we renotice everything, which is very expensive. And we've done a lot of noticing on this property. So we would have to renotice it if we do come up with a solution that goes outside of the provisions that have already been amended. But I think that to allow for the possibility that we won't do that, our request would be to a date certain. If you don't feel that August 27th is enough time or staff doesn't, you know, we're open to the date, but I would respectfully request a date so that we can not have to start over with all of our newspaper notifications and everything that goes along with it.
Director Curtis, how about another 2 weeks on?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Ertel, members of the commission. So you're looking at, I mentioned before August, so you're looking at September 10th and September 24th.
Which one do you choose? September 10th, how's that? Maybe you could arm wrestle for it.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, a question, if I may, of staff as far as what would trigger a re-notification. Based on the direction that we've heard regarding mini storage, do you have a guess at whether or not we're going to be triggering a different provision of the ordinance for handling that?
Mr. Chair, I'm assuming you want me to respond on that. So what we're anticipating is advertising, letting the community know that we're amending Article 3, which is the definition section of the zoning code, which we currently haven't advertised. So that's one thing. Working through that definition to see what we can do about, and then anything else that we need to do to deal with this general plan issue, because it is defined. And so those are some things that we're going to have to brainstorm. And we were able to do that before, and we'd like to continue doing that. It just takes some time. So to answer the question in terms of what specifically, I'm thinking Article 3 hadn't been contemplated or advertised, and so we'd have to do that, regardless of what date you pick. And if you pick a date and we don't meet it, then we'll have to continue it again because we advertised an original date. But without a date, we would at least not have to come back with another continuance because we had to cure some sort of notification flaw. So again, our recommendation is consistent with the motion on the table, to a date to be determined, and certainly we don't want this project lingering in our office any longer than anyone else does. We'd like to get it to the Planning Commission as soon as possible, with your recommendation eventually to the City Council. I don't know if September 10th works or not for the applicant team, but it's certainly better than August.
Commissioner Joyner is suggesting the 24th then. Is that too long for you?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, based on the response of staff that we're probably going to have to re-advertise part of this, our preference would be then to withdraw a continuance request and ask the commission to move forward as it sees fit, because we can then process a text amendment to address the mini storage and basically achieve the same time frame on that, but move forward with the bulk of it as well. So it kind of would take separate tracks, but that would, because we have to renotice it anyway, if you made the motion and if you were to exclude the mini storage from that motion, we could still pursue this solution just outside of this pending application and isolate it to that issue.
Vice Chair?
So, in essence, then, we would be, if we voted in the positive, it would be with staff's recommended stipulations to the text amendment, correct?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, that would certainly be your prerogative, and that is what I'm getting at, yes.
Okay, so we would just remove the warehousing component of this whole thing.
My problem isn't with the warehousing.
Okay, so if we simply approve as staff has recommended, that does exclude the warehouses. Yes, okay. So I need to withdraw my motion, or does that have to get officially shot down? Can I simply withdraw it?
Yeah, Commissioner Ertel, because there has not been a second, you can withdraw the motion without having a vote of the body.
I'd be delighted.
So withdrawn. Okay, now we're back to seeking a motion.
In that case, then I will make another motion. Let's see how this one goes. Make a motion for recommendation of approval to City Council for Case 6 TA 2024, after finding that the zoning text amendment, Attachment 2, Exhibit A, staff's draft, excluding the warehouse land use, is consistent and conforms with the adopted general plan. But as Commissioner Joyner used to do, I say this under protest.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Chair Scarborough,
Yes.
Vice Chair Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
No.
Commissioner Ertel,
Yes.
Commissioner Joyner,
No.
Commissioner Drake,
No.
Commissioner Reed.
No.
Motion fails 4-3.
With the motion failed, I'm seeking another motion for this text amendment.
I thought that was the motion for the text.
We had to,
We don't need
is
another.
the fail enough, Mr. Curtis?
Chair Scarborough, so because the motion has not passed, we haven't resolved this matter yet. The motion was to issue a recommendation of approval. Because that motion failed, that means there is no recommendation of approval, and we are still alive, so to speak.
Thank you. Okay, so Chair is still seeking a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Commissioner Joyner?
I move to deny case 6TA 2024 after finding the text amendment does not meet my criteria. I don't know how to word it.
If I might, Commissioner Joyner, I
Thank
think
you.
the easier way to move forward may be to just make a motion for a recommendation of denial
Okay.
of case 6TA 2024.
I move to recommend denial of this case. Thank you.
Great, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Chair Scarborough,
No.
Vice Chair Young,
No.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
No.
Commissioner Ertel,
No.
Commissioner Joyner,
Yes.
Commissioner Drake,
Yes.
Commissioner Reed.
Yes.
Let's say 3-4.
Okay, so Chair Scarborough, I believe since this motion has also failed, we've now had a motion to recommend approval and a motion to recommend denial. The rules don't contemplate us sort of just timing out. We do have to have some kind of resolution here, so we are effectively still alive.
Thank you, and I understand completely. So right now, we've had motions both ways, and it's been 4-3. So if there's a new motion that can be presented that is different than the last two that we've seen, so that we can perhaps have action?
I'll move back to my original motion. Do you still have a copy of that? Can we just read that off again, or did you dump it? Make a motion to continue case 6TA.
Point of order real quick. We can't initiate it. The applicant has withdrawn her request to continue, so we cannot initiate it.
You're right, you're right. Never mind.
It's okay.
I don't understand what we're being asked to make a motion for. I'm confused.
So Commissioner Joyner, it seems like, yeah, we might have gotten a little mixed up on that last one. So the original motion that failed was a motion to recommend approval. At that point, the recommendation of approval would have been forwarded on to council. That got voted down. That was rejected. That motion did not pass. So the second motion was to issue a recommendation of denial, which would have still moved that recommendation on to council. So I'm not sure if maybe there was some unclarity there, but I believe that was the point of the motion. But those are kind of the two options we had. The third option that council has, that motion has not been made yet, is a motion to recommend continuance. In that case, it does go on to city council, and then it's up to city council whether or not to continue the matter. There's nothing in the rules that say you can't make another motion for the same outcome. You could certainly make another motion to either recommend approval or denial if you felt like maybe there was going to be a different outcome, or you can make a motion to recommend continuance. But at this point, because the applicant has withdrawn their request for continuance, this body cannot continue it to a future meeting of this body.
So the continuance would be to council, not to planning commission.
It would be a recommendation for council to continue the matter on their own, because council has more authority to continue matters unilaterally.
Yeah. Commissioner Gonzalez.
I wanted to ask you a question. Now, since they pulled their continuance, they said that they didn't want to continue it. Am I correct in that understanding?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gonzalez, the reasoning for requesting the withdrawal of the continuance has to do with what appears to be the bulk of the issue centered around mini storage.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. That you said that you didn't want the continuance. So now, legal counsel, if they don't want a continuance, why are we saying that we want a continuance?
Commissioner Gonzalez, I'm not sure, I don't know what is being desired at this point. I'm just indicating what the rules of procedure allow, which is if the applicant is not requesting a continuance, then the Planning Commission cannot continue this matter unilaterally. You can make a recommendation for council to do so, but Planning Commission cannot do it itself.
Very good. Thank you for clarification. I was confused.
Vice Chair.
I'll try again. I'll make a motion for recommendation of approval to the City Council for Case 6TA 2024 after finding that the zoning text amendment, Attachment 2, Exhibit A, staff's draft, excluding the warehouse land use, is consistent and conforms with the adopted general plan.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Roll call vote.
Chair Scarborough,
Yes.
Vice Chair Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Yes.
Commissioner Ertel,
Yes.
Commissioner Joyner,
No.
Commissioner Drake,
No.
Commissioner Reed.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-2.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Ms. Oberholzer. Moving on to item 3 of the regular agenda, 597 PA 2024-2, accessory dwelling unit text amendment initiation. Mr. Carr?
Thank you. Is it on? Okay, thank you and good evening, Chair Scarborough, members of the commission. We're back at it again here with items to address state legislation. Next up on the docket is a recently passed legislation, this latest legislative session with the state related to accessory dwelling units again. And during this last legislative session, the state legislator addressed a cleanup with the ADU bill that happened primarily last year. This cleanup addressed a number of different issues, mostly in bulk, related to the state legislation, related to counties' regulation of ADUs. But in addition to those new county regulations to ADUs, there was new text added to clarify how the airport exclusion related to the city's legislation on how we can exclude ADUs adjacent or near airports. The airport exclusion was revised to now include a 65 decibel threshold in order to determine eligibility. Anything with a sound level greater than 65 decibels would still remain uneligible, but those properties, even though they may be in vicinity of the airport that have a 65 decibel or lower, or that are lower than 65 decibels in sound, would now become eligible as a result of the changes to the legislation. That, again, as a result, it dramatically shrinks the exclusion area for ADUs. If you don't know, that 65 decibel area is usually just right around the airport, directly right around the airport. All other provisions of the ADU requirements remain intact from last year, and these new provisions must be adopted by the city no later than the end of this year. Just, again, a quick background of the legislation from last year. That was House Bill 2720. This added all the requirements for ADUs and the requirement for the city to allow ADUs to our zoning ordinance. All those standards are on the screen. I won't go through all of them, but the gist of it is most properties in the city would allow for at least one ADU on all single-family properties, with the ability in some instances to increase that to 2 or 3 ADUs in addition to that existing single-family residence on the property. There's also some provisions that dictates the size of those ADUs, as well as the city not being able to require fire sprinklers in those ADUs, which is in conflict with how we typically address any kind of residential property or building in the city. And that also, that legislative language also allows ADUs to be rented separately from the main residence on the property as a long-term rental. Those were adopted, those new provisions last year, late last year, November 2024. So with this update, our approach is going to be to simply just change how we approach the airport exclusion in our zoning ordinance. That small modification will be, again, just very precise to how we address the 65 decibel requirement that's now within the code, or will be now within the code. Timeline, again, is similar to all of our other text amendments. We are initiating with you tonight and drafting that text amendment shortly thereafter. We'll then go out to public outreach in September and October of this year, hopefully back to you early October for a recommendation on that new proposed text, and then finally city council hearing again in November. So this evening, we are requesting initiation from the Planning Commission of this new text amendment to address this new state legislation and all applicable sections of the code that are required to be updated. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Do we have any questions from the commissioners?
I have a question.
I got it real quick.
Oh, sorry.
Commissioner Gonzalez and then Commissioner Joyner.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Carr, I had a question about now the attached ADUs. They're still an ADU, am I correct, when they're even attached to the main structure?
Chair Scarborough, Commissioner Gonzalez, you are correct. ADU could be an attached or detached structure.
So then, but as far as I remember on the first passing of this ordinance, that structure it needed to be sprinkled?
Yes, you are again correct. If it's an ADU, that portion, even if it was attached to the main building, would not be required to be sprinklered, even if the main building is still required to be sprinklered.
How does that work with our ordinances that we had passed in, I forget, a long time ago, when they required the sprinklers? That still, if you leave that part of the house, because it's still part of the house, although it has a different entranceway, correct? Is that what classifies as an ADU?
Yep.
Then the structure that burns without the fire sprinkler offers no protection for the house that's sprinkled. Am I correct in that?
Correct. There are some building code requirements, none of which I'm a complete expert on, but I have some kind of periphery knowledge of that would require a fire separation wall between the two units.
Right.
It may help with that, but yes, in general, the ADU would not be sprinklered or does not be required to be sprinklered, but the main residence would be sprinklered, even if they're both attached.
When staff interpreted this and looked at this, what was the recommendation of staff at the time that they saw this? Because I'm sure it's not a glaring error on my part. What was the construct of this thought pattern of this? Is it something that we're faced that we have to do no matter if we like it or not?
Yes.
Pretty much, yeah. And the staff didn't really have any input on this. The standards that of fire sprinklers are, while not totally unique to Scottsdale, are one of the things that kind of separate us from a lot of communities. So maybe in drafting this requirements at the state level, they just didn't really think about those type of provisions that may be present here in Scottsdale. But I think there was a concerted effort on the drafting of this to maybe limit the cost by not requiring fire sprinklers. But it puts it in direct conflict with how we normally do things here in our building code and our amendments to the building code, and how we have those fire sprinklers normally in every single family residence or residential building for that matter.
Is there anything that the city of Scottsdale can do to kind of remove this conflict?
Well, short of the state changing their requirements, no, we can't, can't go around that requirement that's at the state level. It had to be amended at the state level.
Okay, very good. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Gonzalez. Commissioner Joyner.
Thank you. First of all, I want to commend you of doing an absolutely wonderful job of presenting an absolutely horrific change to the city of Scottsdale. Anyway, my comment has to do with our current policy of if a property is rented neighbors to the right and the left and directly across the street, first of all, the rental has to have a permit, and neighbors have to be notified when there's a rental. Does that apply to the ADUs? Because you know these are all going to be rentals.
Sure. Chair Scarborough and Commissioner Joyner, I guess maybe a point of clarification real quick. Are you referring to a long-term rental or short-term rental?
Any rentals.
Okay. For long-term rentals, there's not a notification requirement currently, but if a property were to have a main residence and perhaps another building that they wanted to rent out separately, that's not permitted currently. Now with this new, or it wasn't permitted until the ADU requirements allowed that.
Right.
So now with this ADU requirements, they can rent the main residence and that separate building as an ADU, 2 separate ADUs and 2 separate renters or 2 separate people. Short-term rental-wise, there's still the notification requirement that is there presently, but how the short-term rental side of it works is we would say typically that you can't rent out the short-term, 2 different buildings separately as different short-term rentals, or even have the main residence occupied by the owner and the short-term rental be, or the other building be a short-term rental. That's also changed with this legislation. It now allows the other ancillary building to be a short-term rental as long as the property owner lives at the site. So before, both buildings would have had to been rented completely as one short-term rental. That can now change where the homeowner can now reside on the site and have this ancillary building be rented separately as a short-term rental.
But does the notification still apply?
It does,
And the
yes.
permitting, getting a permit from the city of Scottsdale?
It does, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Joyner. Any other questions for staff? If no other questions, if anybody would like to make a motion?
I'm not making it.
Sure.
I'm not making it.
Make a motion to initiate Project 597 PA 2024, number 2, for the zoning code text amendment.
Thank you, Commissioner Ertel. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Vice Chair. We have a first and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Chair Scarborough,
Yes.
Vice Chair Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Gonzalez,
Regretfully, yes.
Commissioner Ertel,
Yes.
Commissioner Joyner,
Under protest, yes.
Commissioner Drake,
Yes.
Commissioner Reed.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. I believe that closes our docket for the day. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 We're adjourned.